This is number 4 from Unit 2 on the midterm review. All right, so for number 4, we have many questions that deal with these same two functions, g and h. So if you look at part A, it says find g of 5. So sometimes it's helpful to rewrite whatever function you're working with. And then g of 5 just means take this 5 and replace it wherever there's an x. All right, so if you do 12 times 5 and you take away 3, 12 times 5 is 60. And if you take away 3, you'll have 57. H is similar, or for part B is similar, except we're working with function h. So just to be careful on this one, when you plug in -3 for x, you want to make sure you do it in parentheses, especially if you're going to use your calculator to plug in -3 squared. You have to keep in mind a negative squared means a negative times another negative, which will give you a positive number. So really you should have 9 plus 2, or in other words, 11. A lot of people will type in -3 squared in their calculator, and they'll get -9, and that's if you don't put parentheses on it. So be very, very careful on that one. For C, it wants us to find x when g of x equals 51. So I'm going to recopy the original g of x function. This is what we don't know. We don't know x. So we know that g of x is supposed to equal 51, so that's what we're going to put right here. Okay, so be careful you're not just plugging in 51 for x, because x is what we're trying to find, so we don't know what that is yet. So if we solve for x, we're going to add 3 to both sides first, and then divide both sides by 12, and then 54 divided by 12 is going to give you 4.5. So for part D, we're still using the same two functions, but these are composition. So for composition, you start on the inside. So we're going to find h of 2 first. So if I look at my h function, it's supposed to be x squared, but in place of x, we're going to put 2 plus 2. So we have 4 plus 2. So h of 2 is really just 6. With composition, you take whatever you get from the inside function and you plug it into the outside function. So now we need to find g of 6. So 12, instead of x, we're going to put 6 minus 3. 12 times 6 is going to give us 72. And then 72 minus 3 is 69. So you really only have one final answer, and it's after you do both functions. E is similar, except here we're going to start with g. We're going to start by plugging in -1 for x. So we'll have -12 minus 3, which is -15. Then we're going to take that -15 and plug it into h. So again, be careful. Make sure you put parentheses around that negative. 15 squared is 225. And we add 2 to that. Your final answer for E should be 227. F, even though it looks a little bit different with that open circle, is asking the same kind of question. Usually what I do is when I see that open circle, I draw a set of parentheses and then draw one at the end. And then it pretty much looks the same. So when I look at this, you're going to start with h of 0. So 0 squared plus 2 is going to get 2. And then that 2 is going to get plugged into g. So 12 times 2 minus 3. So 24 minus 3 should end up with 21. The last parts of this question deal with composition, but notice there's no number there. So this is where you're taking the entire other function and plugging it in. So essentially what we're doing here, we're going to plug h into g. So we're taking all of h and we're plugging it into g. So it's going to look like 12, but in place of the x, we're going to put the other function, which is that x squared plus 2. And we can just clean it up. We're not going to get a numerical answer for this. There'll be an x in our answer. So 12x squared plus 24. We can't forget about that minus 3 at the end. So we should end up with 12x squared plus 21. We look at h. This one's the same letters, but it's backwards. So we're starting with, we're going to take g of x and plug it into h. So we're taking g and we're plugging it in here. Now be careful, when you plug it in, that squared is still there and that plus 2 is still there. So in the parentheses, we should have 12x minus 3. Just to be really careful about how you multiply this out, you're not just going to take and square the 12x and the 3. When you have a set of parentheses squared, it means take and rewrite it twice. That's what it means to square something, is multiply it by itself twice. And we still have that plus 2 at the end. So we're going to have to distribute or FOIL these two together. So 144 x to the second minus 36x minus another 36x plus 9, and we still have that plus 2 at the end. We have a few like terms we can combine, and then that'll be it. 144 x squared. These two together can make a negative 72x. And then the 9 and the 2 at the end make 11.